This is Bob Oliphant from the Westford Historical Society and Museum, bringing you episode 28 of season 4 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. The Westford Wardsman newspaper was part of Turner's Public Spirit, a weekly newspaper in Ayer a century ago. In this episode, we'll be reading the Wardsman for the week ending Saturday, July 15th, 1911, and I'll elaborate on what was happening in Westford that week. The week starts with the About Town section. H.E. Fletcher and Company stone quarry contractors are busy furnishing stone for a large addition to the Lowell Gas Light Company's buildings. The thunder shower on Monday afternoon that furnished lightning to strike the farm buildings of Goldsmith Conant in Parkerville and furnished a cloudburst of rain to go with it, furnished only 14 drops of rain for one farmer in Stony Brook Valley. The 13 drops went on the farm, and one fell on his hot neck while hoeing and sizzled like a hot stone. This is undoubtedly the author of the About Town section, Samuel Taylor, speaking about himself. A swamp fire is burning near the residence of Mrs. Sarah Drew on the Boston Road. Between dry stumps and peat, it comes near beating the sun in heat. The town sprayer has been called to spray it out, but so far its resistance has been stout. The Unitarian Church will close for vacation after next Sunday. Charles Whitney has moved the small barn that occupied front place near the larger and newer barn to a plumb-level west view of his dwelling house and proposes to add wings and gradually wing his way into the poultry business. John A. Taylor is gathering the benefits of being guest of Professor and Mrs. W.H. Whitcomb of Newton. Professor Whitcomb was formerly connected with Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Millard F. Sawyer, master of Groton Grange, and Mrs. Sawyer visited the old Oaken Bucket farm on Sunday afternoon, which resulted in Samuel L. and William R. Taylor visiting Groton Grange on Tuesday evening. The old Oaken Bucket farm is having sweet corn for dinner today, 77 days from planting. He always liked to brag about how he was one of the earliest to produce an edible crop. Miss Frances Bannister is spending school vacation days by the cooling waves of Swampscott. Henry M. Cabell has kept dry weather wet by irrigation, and as a strawberry specialist, he harvested $700 worth, while others were raising red strawberry leaves. The Steeles, S-T-E-L-E-S, Mervyn F. and family have gone to Canada in the interest of reciprocity with the weather and are visiting relatives. The next section is entitled Deaths, and it mentions several. Mrs. Elizabeth Scott Wilson died at her home on the Carlisle Road on Thursday evening, July 6th, after a long and painful illness. She was of sturdy Scotch descent, which she exemplified in sturdy positive opinions and actions at all times. She fostered no neutral opinions and was not an admirer of the principle in the life of society. Trained in the Scotch reverence and daily reading of the Bible, she maintained this daily discipline through life. Her home life was regulated by those qualities and transmitted to those who, quote, rise up and call her blessed. This is a quote from Proverbs 31, verse 28, in the description of a virtuous woman. The funeral took place from the home on Monday afternoon, Reverend David Wallace conducting the service. The singing of Jesus, Lover of My Soul and The Christian Good Night was by Elizabeth and Jenny Kimball and Rachel and Florence Wilson, grandchildren of the deceased. Besides her husband, John Wilson, she leaves 4 children, James D., J. Arthur E., Florence Wilson, and Mrs. George A. Campbell, and 10 grandchildren. The bearers were James and Arthur Wilson, George A. Kimball, and George Wright. Burial was in Fairview Cemetery under the direction of David L. Grieg, undertaker. Dr. George F. Harwood, who died in Worcester after several years' illness, was in early life a resident of Westford, the son of Ephraim A. Harwood, living at Brookside. He attended the Namnasset School and later the Stony Brook School, where the writer was schoolmate with him and rounded out his education at Westford Academy. Burial was at Fairview Cemetery on Thursday afternoon in charge of David L. Grieg, undertaker. Thomas H. Murray died on Wednesday morning at his home on the Concord Road after a long and painful illness from dropsy. That's what we would now call edema, swelling caused by too much fluid, typically trapped in body tissue like the legs and feet. For several years, he had been section foreman on the Nashua and Acton Railroad and was a member of Westford Grange. That's what we know as the Red Line, the Nashua and Acton Railroad. The next section is the Westford Center section. Friends of Miss Mabel Rand, a former teacher at the Academy, will sympathize with her in the illness and disappointment she has recently had to undergo. Miss Rand had made all plans and preparations to go to Europe during the long vacation, and very shortly before the time for sailing was taken very seriously ill and underwent an operation for appendicitis, and the weeks that were to have been spent in travel will have to be spent in the hospital and convalescence. Harold W. Hildreth has returned from an enjoyable vacation spent in Maine. During the severe shower on last week Thursday evening, with its thunder and lightning, the cable in front of the Academy was burned out. This would be in front of what is now Rodenbush Community Center on Main Street, then the Westford Academy. The lightning struck with a sharp report, and the fireworks for a few minutes were most spectacular and unpleasant. The heavy cable fell across the trolley wire and then into the street, where it was a serious menace to any passing by. The chairman of the selectmen was notified, and he got help together, and with lanterns, boards, barrels, etc., that part of the street where the fallen cable lay was roped off, and men stationed to patrol that part of the street. Word was sent to headquarters at Lowell, and in a comparatively short time, linemen were on hand and repaired damages. The result was that many subscribers had their telephones out of commission, and the service was not very correct for a number of days, but is now back to normal. Mr. and Mrs. Henry M. Wright were at Harwood Wright's over Sunday, but went the first of the week to join their son Livingston, who is at a boys' camp at Wolfboro, New Hampshire, where they expect to stay for a week. Nothing like you're having your parents visit you when you're away at a boys' camp for the summer. Robert S. Young has been quite ill during the week and under his physician's care. Mr. and Mrs. Austin Foss were in town this week, calling on friends. At present, they are staying in Lowell. Mrs. Wallace and Pauline and Rachel, their two children, also Mrs. Wallace's sister, Mrs. Tarleton, and son Grafton, are at Swampscott for a week, where Reverend Mr. Wallace will join them a part of the time. Albert E. Prescott is enjoying vacation days at home. Last Thursday afternoon, when the heat was at its worst and every man capable of fighting fire felt that his own particular task was enough to meet, an alarm for fire was sounded, which proved to be on land owned by Miss Hildreth. Some of the telephones were out of commission, and the church bells were rung in the old-fashioned way. That's to alert the firefighters. Donald Cameron kindly gathered together a group of firefighters in his big automobile. After some vigorous work, it was controlled. It was reported that a workman had set fire to a hornet's nest earlier in the day, and the fire from that smoldered and later broke out and got beyond control. Those in charge of the events of the Westford Athletic Association felt that 2 games of baseball on July 4th were sufficient for that week, but this week the team plays at Milford, New Hampshire on Saturday afternoon. Owing to the pressure of other duties, Alfred Hartford has resigned as manager of the association, and Walter Merritt will attend to the carrying out of the schedule for the remainder of the season, which will be as already arranged. Next Saturday, the team again goes to Townsend. It is sincerely hoped that the recent increase of salaries for the RFD, that's Rural Free Delivery, mail carriers will affect our two mail carriers, although they have not at this time received any notice that the $100 a year additional will come their way. Mr. Wright of Route 1 and Mr. Balch of Route 2 have been in charge ever since the system was established in town and have rendered a most faithful and satisfactory service. The selectmen and the property owners along our main street have under consideration at this time a plan for oiling the street to abate the summer dust nuisance. This plan apparently was put into effect because they're still doing it, I believe. The next couple paragraphs are about a picnic. The excessive heat, the drought, and getting the hay crops have pretty much occupied people's attention the last week, and readable items for our columns are not too plenty. Each household has had to solve the problem of meeting the great heat and humidity the best it could. It would seem that the weather the last week would at least teach us to meet ordinary hot weather with comparative philosophy. The weather last week Friday was the one exception, with its comfortable temperature and the freshening effect of the good shower the night before, and this was fortunate for the annual outing of the Congregational Sunday School. This year the children and their parents and friends went to Canopy Lake Park, leaving here on the 745 car. That's trolley car. The day was spent in enjoying the many attractions of the park, a picnic dinner together at noon, and a ball game in the early afternoon. At night, a later car on our branch line that had been especially arranged for met the party at Brookside and brought them home, perhaps pretty tired, but feeling that it had been a most successful outing. Mr. Wallace and Mr. Osgood efficiently looked after the details of the trip. Now there's a little item from Groton that's of interest. It's under the Groton news items. At the regular meeting of the Grange on Tuesday night, there was a small attendance owing to the extreme heat, but all who heard Samuel Taylor of Westford speak on, quote, the magnitude of the universe, end quote, were glad to endure such heat in order to listen to the interesting address, which was instructive as well as interesting to a very high degree. The Grange sang their song, Old Glory, and further services were dispensed with. There's also an item from Ayer under the District Court section. Thomas Bast, James Morst, Michael Dennis, D-E-N-E-S, Albert Hope, Aaron Orner, John Korst, and Joe Dennis, all of Westford charged with indecent exposure, were in court last Saturday. Their cases were continued until today. We'll hear more about this next week. That's the news in Westford for the week ending July 15th, 1911. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Ryan Cousins of Westford CAT for providing technical support. You can find transcriptions and podcasts from the Wardsman at our website at museum.westford.org, or visit the Historical Society's Facebook page for more Westford news from days gone by. This is Bob Oliphant, and I hope you will join us for next week's Westford Wardsman podcast. Thank you.